There is a place erased from every map, a village where no one returns. They say the road itself disappears once you step onto it. The bells never ring, the fog whispers with faces, and even the graves have no names. Tonight, you will hear the story of the forgotten village, but remember, once you know the path, it might find you too. The night was heavy with silence when Daniel's car rolled onto the narrow, broken road. He had taken a wrong turn hours ago, his phone GPS losing signal the moment he left the main highway. The map refused to reload, and all he had was the dim headlights cutting through the mist that seemed to thicken with every passing mile. He was on his way to meet his friends at a cabin in the mountains, a weekend escape from the noise of city life. But somewhere along the way, the road signs stopped making sense. They bore strange, faded symbols instead of words, and the trees leaned unnaturally close, their branches clawing at his windshield like hands desperate to hold him back. Daniel slowed down. The air felt wrong. It wasn't just fog, it was as though the darkness itself had weight, pressing down on him, crawling into the car through the vents. The clock on his dashboard flickered, then froze at 12:07 am. No matter how much he tapped it, the numbers refused to move. That was when he saw it. A weather-beaten wooden sign at the edge of the road. It leaned crookly, half swallowed by weeds. On it, in jagged letters that looked like they were carved with a knife, was one word, Black Hollow. Daniel frowned. He'd never heard of the place. He looked around, no lights, no houses, not even the hum of another vehicle in the distance, just trees. Endless, suffocating trees. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, but when he checked his rearview mirror, his blood ran cold. The road behind him was gone, not just hidden by fog gone. His headlights showed nothing but trees where the road had once been. Heart hammering, Daniel pressed the gas, desperate to move forward. The car jerked, rattled, and reluctantly rolled deeper into the mist. Minutes turned into an eternity. The silence pressed in heavier and heavier until he realized something horrifying. He hadn't seen a single animal, no birds, no crickets, not even the rustle of leaves in the wind. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Finally, the fog began to thin, revealing a small clearing. At its center stood a crumbling stone arch, black moss crawling over its surface. Beyond it, the faint outline of what looked like rooftops. A village. Relief surged through Daniel. Civilization, people, help. He parked his car just before the arch and stepped out. The air was colder here, so cold his breath came out in thick clouds. As he approached the arch, he noticed something strange carved into the stone. A series of faces, dozens of them. Their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide with terror. Daniel shivered and looked past it, trying to ignore the carvings. The rooftops grew clearer, now shapes of houses, clustered together, their windows dark and lifeless. A village lost in time. But as he walked under the arch, a sound cut through the silence. The toll of a bell. It rang once. Low, deep, vibrating in his chest. Daniel froze. There was no church tower in sight. No bell anywhere. The sound came again, and this time with it came whispers. Dozens of them circling him in the fog, hissing in voices too faint to understand. Except for one word that surfaced clearly, chilling him to the bone. Welcome. Daniel spun around, his pulse roaring in his ears. The arch was gone. The car was gone. There was only the village now, and somewhere deep within its lifeless streets, something was waiting. Daniel stood frozen at the edge of the forgotten village. The fog clung to the crooked rooftops, weaving through the decayed chimneys and broken shutters like a living thing. No street lamps burned, no candles flickered inside the windows. The air was thick with damp rot, carrying the smell of something long dead. He forced himself to move forward. His footsteps crunched against gravel and shattered glass, echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. For every step he took, the sound lingered, repeating, as though invisible feet were walking just a few paces behind him. He told himself it was just the acoustics of the village. Old buildings had ways of distorting sound. But deep down, he knew better. The first house Daniel approached leaned sideways, its walls splitting with ivy, its front door hanging from rusted hinges. A wooden sign dangled above it, swaying with no wind to push it. The letters had been scratched out, leaving only deep gouges. He hesitated, then stepped inside. The smell hit him, first mildew, dust, and something coppery metallic. The interior was a ruin. Overturned chairs, a table split in half, wallpaper peeled and blackened with mold. Cobwebs hung in thick curtains from the ceiling beams. But what unsettled him most was the sound. Every footstep he took inside the house echoed tenfold. He would move once, but the creaking of the floorboards repeated long after, bouncing through the halls like an invisible crowd walking in step with him. "Hello?" he called, his voice trembling. The echo came back warped. "Hello, hello," until the last fragment no longer sounded like his voice. It was deeper, harsher, and it whispered back only one word: "Stay." Daniel's throat went dry. He stumbled back into the doorway, heart hammering in his chest, when something caught his eye. On the wall opposite him, faint in the dust and mold, were handprints. Dozens of them. Small, childlike hands pressed into the wallpaper, as though clawing at it in desperation. Some dragged downward, leaving long smears behind. Daniel fled the house and stumbled back into the road. His breaths came fast, clouding in the cold air. The village stretched deeper than he expected, a maze of collapsing houses and broken lampposts. At the far end of the main road, he could see the outline of a larger structure, taller, grander. Its roof was domed, and jagged glass still clung to the empty window frames. It looked like a mansion. Something about it drew him in, though every instinct screamed at him to turn away. He started down the road, passing houses that leaned so close together it felt like they were watching him. The windows gaped open, black and hollow, like sockets of skulls. And then he heard it again. The echo, but this time it wasn't his footsteps. It was ahead of him. Slow, dragging steps moving just beyond the fog. Each one followed by a faint scrape, as though something heavy was being pulled along the ground. Daniel froze. The sound stopped. He strained his ears, but silence fell heavy once more. He almost convinced himself he had imagined it, until a door slammed open just a few houses down. Bang! The echo of it rattled through the village. Then another door opened, then another. All the way down the street, one by one, doors creaked and banged open on their own. By the time it reached him, every single house stood with its door wide, gaping like a mouth. And from within each house came the whispers. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Too many to be human. Panicked, Daniel sprinted toward the mansion at the end of the road. His chest burned, his legs ached, but he didn't dare stop until he stood before its rotting wooden doors. They were massive, carved with ornate patterns that had long since rotted away into jagged scars. He shoved them open, the groan of the hinges echoing like thunder. Inside was a vast entrance hall. A cracked chandelier hung low from the ceiling, its crystals shattered across the floor. Faded paintings lined the walls, portraits of people dressed in clothing from centuries past. Their faces were blurred with time, but their eyes remained clear. Every painted eye seemed to follow Daniel as he stepped inside. The hall was lined with long corridors stretching into blackness. And the echoes here were worse. Every sound bounced back louder than before. His breathing came back ragged, panicked. His heartbeat thudded against the walls. His footsteps were repeated endlessly, so loud it sounded as though a mob of people were following just behind him. Yet when he turned, nothing. Just the empty doorway and the fog outside. Daniel stepped deeper into the hall, desperate to find answers, maybe even another person. His flashlight beam landed on a large portrait at the far end of the hall. It showed a family, mother, father, two children, posed stiffly in front of the very same mansion he now stood in. Their eyes were too sharp, too real, almost like they weren't painted at all but captured. He moved closer and his stomach twisted. The faces in the portrait were familiar. The father's sharp jawline, the boy's crooked smile. They looked like people he'd seen before, not in real life, no. In the reflections of windows and the flickers of shadows behind him, in the corner of his eye as he walked through the village, and the mother's face. She was standing at the top of the staircase. Daniel spun around, and there she was. A tall, gaunt woman in a faded gown, her hair long and tangled, her eyes black hollows that swallowed the light. Her mouth opened, and the echoes poured out his own footsteps. His own voice, the slamming of doors, all rushing at him in a deafening roar. He stumbled backward, covering his ears, but the sound was inside his head, reverberating in his skull until blood dripped from his nose. "Leave me alone," he shouted. The echoes mocked him back, alone, 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 until finally, in a voice not his own, the mansion whispered, "You already are." Daniel collapsed to his knees, trembling, staring up at the woman on the stairs. She hadn't moved. She only stood there, still as stone, her hollow eyes locked on him. And then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed down one of the dark corridors. Daniel's flashlight flickered. His stomach clenched. Whatever waited for him there, he knew it would be worse than anything he'd already seen. But he had no choice. Because behind him, from the open doors of the village, the whispers were coming closer. The door to the basement stood before me like a wound in the house itself. A thin crack of darkness leaked through its edges, and the smell god, that smell poured out in waves. Damp stone, mildew, and something sharper metallic. The smell of rust or blood. My hand hovered over the knob, slick with sweat. For hours, I had tried to ignore the whispers seeping up through the floorboards above, but they had grown louder, clearer. I had to see for myself. The knob was cold against my palm as I turned it, the hinges groaning as though in protest. The narrow wooden stairs descended into a pit of blackness that seemed endless. My flashlight flickered the second the door opened, the beam sputtering weakly, like even the light was reluctant to enter. Step by step, I forced myself down. Each plank groaned beneath my weight, and with every sound, the air seemed to grow heavier. It pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. The whispers were faint at first, like a crowd far away, voices overlapping and bleeding into one another. But as I descended, they grew sharper. At the 10th step, I could make out words. "Don't go down. You shouldn't be here. He's still waiting." I froze. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might give me away to whatever lingered below. My throat burned with the urge to retreat, to slam the door shut and pretend none of this was real. But something deeper than fear pulled me onward. Curiosity? No, it wasn't mine. It felt as if the house itself was tugging at me, insisting I come closer. When my foot touched the stone floor, I almost slipped. Moisture slicked the uneven slabs, reflecting the jittering beam of my light. The basement spread out in front of me, wide, cavernous, far larger than I had expected. Old wooden shelves lined the walls, bowing under the weight of jars filled with cloudy liquid. Some contained broken things, scraps of cloth, rusted nails, blackened shapes I couldn't identify. But others, God help me, others contained bones. Small bones, fingers, jaws. Rib cages curled in on themselves like cages that had failed to hold whatever they once trapped. The air was freezing, colder than outside, colder than any cellar had the right to be. My breath puffed white into the gloom, curling upward as though reluctant to sink into the darkness. The whispers grew louder. They were no longer in the room around me. They were inside my head, sliding through the cracks in my thoughts, pushing aside my own inner voice. Why did you come back? You were told not to return. You belong here now. I staggered back, clutching my head. My flashlight swerved wildly, and for a split second, it illuminated movement shapes crouched in the corners. Hunched figures, too thin, too long, their skin clinging to bones like wet paper. The light touched them, and they scattered into the shadows, dissolving as though they had never been. My stomach twisted. I knew what I saw. Then the beam caught something else. At the far wall, half shrouded in shadow, was a door. Unlike the rest of the decaying basement, this door looked new. Its wood was smooth, unstained, untouched by time. And it wasn't still. The surface seemed to move faintly, rising and falling in slow rhythm, as though it were breathing. A surge of nausea rose in me. My instincts screamed, leave, now. But my feet carried me forward. With each step, the whispers sharpened. Not many voices now. Just one, a woman's voice, soft, gentle, almost kind. Come closer. Don't be afraid. I've been waiting. The door pulsed with her words, the wood trembling with each syllable. I lifted my hand, trembling, toward the iron handle. It was slick, wet, as though someone had been holding it moments before. The whispers stopped. The silence hit me harder than the voices ever had. It wasn't just silence, it was the kind that pressed against my skull, filling my ears with an emptiness so deep it roared louder than sound itself. My breath echoed too loud, my heartbeat thudding like drums, and then behind me, a voice, right at my ear. Don't open it. The hot rush of breath against my skin froze me. My flashlight tumbled from my hand, clattering onto the stones, its beam rolling wildly across the walls. Shadows stretched and snapped like claws. I turned, but no one was there. Or no one human. In the wavering light, the basement was filled. The corners crawled with figures. Dozens. Their shapes hunched, their eyes black pits gleaming faintly. Their skin stretched, faces hollow, mouths open in silent screams. They didn't move toward me, but they watched. Every single one of them. And then they whispered together, a chorus that rattled the air. Don't let him out. I stumbled back, slamming against the breathing door. It shuddered, the wood buckling against my spine like it was eager to burst open. My hands clawed at the wall, desperate to push myself away. But the iron handle turned beneath my palm on its own. The door creaked open. Blackness poured out, not ordinary darkness, but something thicker, heavier, a living shadow that swallowed the light. My flashlight dimmed, sputtered, as though suffocating. From that black void, something began to crawl out. First, a hand-long skeletal, the nails black and broken. Then another. Its skin was ash gray, cracked like old stone. The figure that emerged dragged itself forward, head bowed. And when it lifted its face, it had no mouth. No eyes, just smooth, pale skin stretched tight. But the whispers came from it, louder than ever, pouring straight into my skull. You opened the way. You broke the seal. Now we are free. The basement shook, dust raining from the ceiling. The shelves toppled, jars shattering, spilling bones across the floor. The watching figures in the corners screamed silently, their mouths opening impossibly wide before vanishing into the shadows as though consumed. And still, the thing crawled forward. Its eyeless face tilted toward me, its body jerking unnaturally with every movement. Behind it, the darkness swelled, filling the basement like water flooding a chamber. I tried to run. My legs refused. My body locked, held in place by invisible hands. The whispers filled me, pressed into me, until they weren't around me anymore. They were inside me, coiling, gnawing, consuming. The thing reached out, its cracked hand brushing my cheek. My skin burned, seared where it touched, like ice and fire all at once. And in that touch, I heard the final whisper clearer than ever. You never left. You've always been here. This is where you belong." The basement swallowed me in black, and the last thing I saw was the door closing on its own, sealing me inside with them. The basement never truly let me go. Even when I clawed my way back to the surface, gasping, drenched in sweat and shadows, I carried it with me. Its whispers lingered in my bones. The memory of that eyeless face clung to me like a disease, whispering promises I didn't understand. When I stumbled into the hallway above, it felt different. The air was still thick, but colder. The walls, once peeling with faded wallpaper, now looked warped, as if the wood itself was breathing in slow, labored pulses. My ears strained, desperate for silence, but silence never came. Instead, tick. A single tick, sharp, clean, piercing the air. I froze. Another tick followed, but wrong. Not steady. A tick. And then silence. And then tick. Too long. Too slow. Like a dying heartbeat, each one dragging itself into existence. At the end of the hallway stood a grandfather clock. It hadn't been there before. Its wooden frame was tall and elegant, carved with twisting vines that seemed to writhe in the dim light. The glass pane reflected nothing, not even me, and inside the pendulum hung motionless. Yet it ticked. The sound didn't match the pendulum, didn't even match the second hand. In fact, there was no second hand. I approached slowly, my breath fogging before me as though the air itself froze near the clock. My hand reached out without permission, fingertips brushing the carved wood. The moment I touched it, the house sighed. It wasn't wind. It wasn't the creak of old timber. It was breath. Deep, guttural, exhaled through the walls around me. Dust swirled from the ceiling, and the lights dimmed until only the pale glow of the clock's face remained. Tick. I pressed closer. The numbers on the clock face were wrong. They weren't Roman numerals. They weren't numbers at all. Strange markings, etched like scars, circled the face. Some curled like hooks, others split like jagged mouths. They pulsed faintly, glowing with each tick. And then, beneath the glass, I saw it, a reflection, but not mine. The clock showed a room I wasn't standing in. Its glass pane revealed a child's bedroom, small, old-fashioned, with a wooden bed against the wall and toys scattered across the floor. A single rocking chair stood in the corner, creaking though no one sat in it. And on the bed, a boy, pale, still, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Tick, he blinked, once, slowly, and then his gaze snapped toward me. My breath caught. His lips moved, and though I couldn't hear his voice, I saw the shape of the words. Help me. The tick turned into a bang, deafening in the silence. I stumbled back, clutching my ears, but the sound wasn't just around me, it was inside me. The boy in the reflection sat up, his eyes black, his mouth opening too wide, jaw unhinging. The glass trembled, cracking at the edges. The tick became a scream. The clock's hands spun wildly, faster and faster, the markings glowing brighter until the entire hallway blazed with their light. I turned to run, but the hallway stretched. No matter how far I moved, the clock loomed ahead, always waiting. The boy's scream filled the walls, and then, abruptly, silence. I stopped. The glass was whole again. The boy was gone, but now I was inside. The reflection had changed. The bed, the chair, the toys all there. But instead of showing me, the glass showed the hallway I had just stood in. Empty, silent, and in the bed, it was me. Lying still, eyes open, unblinking. Tick, the pendulum moved. My breath hitched. My heart staggered in my chest. The ticking grew faster, sharper, beating in time with my pulse. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was in my veins, crawling beneath my skin. I stumbled back this time, the hallway let me. The clock loomed in the distance, its face still glowing, the markings shifting like living things. But as I retreated, something moved in the glass. Not me, not the boy, something else. A shape hunched and twisted, its body stretched too thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Long arms scraped across the floor of the reflection, its fingers sharp and blackened. It crawled closer to the inside of the glass, its face hidden in shadow. Tick. The shadow slammed its hand against the glass. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface. The sound reverberated through the house, shaking the floor, rattling the walls. Tick. The cracks spread. The thing pushed harder, its fingers breaking through the glass, sharp shards tumbling onto the floor outside. One by one, its limbs emerged, dragging itself into the hallway with me. Its face rose, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin. The same face I'd seen in the basement. The clock behind it chimed. Not once, not twice. 12 deafening chimes. Each one shaking the air, each one splitting my skull with unbearable sound. And with the 12th, the thing stood fully upright, towering over me, its faceless head tilting down as if listening. Then, the clock stopped. The pendulum froze mid-swing. The sound cut off. Silence. The faceless thing vanished, as though it had never been. I staggered back, gasping, clutching at my chest. My pulse hammered wildly, searching for the missing tick. The hallway was still again. The clock was gone. Only the faint smell of rot lingered, and a single shard of glass on the floor. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside the shard, I saw my reflection, but my eyes weren't mine. They were black. And deep within the shard, behind my reflection, the faceless thing leaned close, whispering without a mouth. "You're running out of time." I thought I had escaped the clock, but time has a way of following you. Even when you think it has stopped, even when you pray for silence, it waits ticking in the dark where you can't hear it, crawling inside your veins. The shard of glass burned in my pocket, heavy as a stone. Sometimes I swore I could feel it pulse, like it had a heartbeat of its own. Every time I touched it, I saw those black eyes again, staring out from inside me, but the house wasn't finished. The hallway stretched on endlessly, doors lining the walls on either side. Some were broken, others sealed shut, their wood scarred as if something had clawed from the other side. Each door whispered as I passed soft, desperate murmurs, like the dying calling for help. I tried not to listen until I reached the door. Unlike the others, this one stood at the very end of the hall. Blackened oak, splintered yet whole, its surface carved with deep grooves. Symbols, not random scratches. Spirals, hooks, mouths, opening and closing. The same markings that had circled the cursed clock's face. And unlike the others, this door didn't whisper. It screamed. Not out loud, no air carried the sound. But in my skull, in my blood, in every nerve, I heard it. Endless screaming. Dozens of voices, hundreds, all pressed against the wood. Some shrill, some guttural, some begging, some cursing, all pain, all trapped. I staggered forward, clutching my head. The closer I came, the louder they became. My vision blurred, my ears ringing with their agony. My body screamed to turn back, to run, but my feet moved on their own. The door called me, and then the handle turned. I froze. I hadn't touched it. The rusted iron handle groaned, shifting, twisting. Slowly, the door cracked open. Blackness seeped from the gap, thicker than shadow, moving like smoke but heavier. It crawled across the floor, reaching for me with unseen hands. And from within the black, the screams grew louder, clearer. "Don't open it. Help me. They'll see you. It's too late." The voices overlapped, tangled together until they were unbearable. I couldn't breathe. My hand rose to the handle, shaking. The moment my skin touched the iron, silence fell. Every scream stopped. I pulled. The door swung open with a groan, and a wave of icy air swept through me, knocking the breath from my lungs. Beyond the threshold was no room, no walls, no floor, only darkness. Endless, shifting, alive, but it wasn't empty. Shapes moved within. Twisted silhouettes writhed and convulsed, their outlines barely visible in the black. Some walked, some crawled, some dragged themselves across an invisible ground. Their faces appeared, screaming in silence, mouths torn open too wide, eyes hollow sockets, and all of them turned toward me. I stepped back, but the door dragged me forward. The pull was magnetic, irresistible. The shard in my pocket burned, searing through the fabric, branding my skin. And then one figure broke free from the dark. It rushed forward, slamming against the threshold. Its hands clawed out, scraping the wood, leaving black scars in its wake. Its head snapped toward me, mouth hanging open in a scream I couldn't hear but felt in my bones. Behind it, more figures swarmed, dozens, hundreds, piling against the invisible barrier of the doorway, desperate to escape. The screams returned so loud now they tore through my skull. Let us out, join us, your time is over. I stumbled, my hands clamping against my ears, blood dripped from my nose. My vision swam. The door pulsed with light, the markings glowing red hot, the barrier between worlds. Thinning, and then from within the swarm I saw it. The faceless thing, tall, crooked, limbs too long, smooth, pale skin where features should be. It moved slowly, parting the screaming masses with its presence. They fell silent as it passed, their screams choking into whispers. It stopped at the doorway and raised its head toward me. This time it spoke. No mouth moved, but the words slammed into my head with force. The door is open. My body convulsed, my knees buckling. The darkness surged forward, spilling into the hallway. Arms reached out, clawing at my clothes, my skin. Faces pressed against me, mouths open wide. The smell of rot, of centuries of decay, filled my lungs. The world went black when the shard shattered. No floor beneath me, no ceiling above, only silence. But silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means you've stepped so far from the living that even the air refuses to remember you. I tried to move, but my body felt nailed in place. Something cold wrapped around my wrists, my ankles. Chains that weren't metal, but shadows. They pulsed like veins, alive, tightening when I struggled. Then the silence broke. Not with screams this time, but with laughter. Faint at first, high-pitched, a child's giggle, echoing in the endless dark. It circled me, teasing, mocking. Then more joined. Deep chuckles, broken cackles. A chorus of madness rising from every direction. And through the laughter, I saw it. The faceless thing. It didn't tower now. It didn't need to. It stood only a few steps away, its head tilting side to side like it was listening to music only it could hear. Its body twitched unnaturally, its neck bending at sharp, unnatural angles. I couldn't speak, but my thoughts screamed, "What do you want from me?" And the answer came, not in words, but in images flooding my skull. I saw the house, long before it was a ruin. Ashpine Road, 1892, the Asylum. Blackwood Hill, men in white coats dragging screaming patients into locked rooms. Needles, straps, electrodes, patients forgotten by their families, starved, experimented on. The screams, the very screams I had heard through the door. They began here, and the faceless thing was born of them, not a ghost, not a demon. Something worse, a creation of suffering. Every scream, every tortured life fed it, shaped it, until it no longer needed faces to exist. It became the asylum itself, the silent asylum. And now, it wanted me. The laughter stopped. The dark fell still. The faceless thing raised its hand, and 1,000 doors appeared around me, stretching into infinity. Each door identical to the one I had opened, each one humming with screams. Behind each door, a different fate. and every door led back here. There was no escape. The chains around my wrists loosened, as if inviting me to choose. My legs shook as I stood. The thing waited, its head tilted in patient mockery. I stumbled to the nearest door and pressed my hand against it. A vision flashed me, wandering endless halls until my body collapsed from exhaustion, my soul fading into one more whisper in the wood. Another door, me strapped to a table, the shadows of doctors cutting my screams, feeding the faceless thing forever. Another door, me becoming like the figures in the swarm, my face hollow, my mouth stretched too wide, clawing at the barrier for eternity. Every door was a prison. Every door was a scream. The faceless thing stepped closer, slowly, patiently. Its presence pressed into me like gravity, suffocating, crushing. My knees buckled, and then I heard it. A whisper, not from the doors, not from the faceless thing. From inside me, the shard. Though shattered, though gone, it still lived inside me. A piece of the cursed clock. The only piece of time the asylum couldn't devour. I gripped my chest, gasping. My heartbeat thundered, sensing with the faint tick-tick inside me. The faceless thing froze. Its head snapped toward the sound. For the first time, it reacted. I feared it. The shard had been a prison. A fragment of time, holding the asylum's hunger in place. And now that it was inside me, I wasn't just prey anymore. I was part of the asylum. The ticking grew louder, faster. The doors rattled, their wood splintering. Screams poured through the cracks. The faceless thing twitched violently, its form glitching, its body splitting into jagged fragments. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. The ticking became unbearable, like 1,000 clocks striking midnight at once.